Welcome everyone. My name is Tom Drost. I'm the co-founder of EstimateRocket, and today I'm going to present our latest success webinar, Time Tracking and EstimateRocket. Subject I'm very excited about. A couple weeks ago we actually released it quietly, and we already have over 35 companies that are already using it that found it on their own. So it looks like it's a feature that people have been looking for, and that's what we anticipated. And very excited to show it to you today. So without further ado, I'll start it rolling. Just a couple of quick notes. There is a question box. If you have questions during the webinar, please leave them in that box, and we will answer them throughout. Some I may get to during the course of the webinar, some I may get to at the end, but please don't hesitate to ask. More questions the better. That's how we learn. Anyone who has been using it, any feedback is always appreciated, and definitely we always love feedback. As all of our existing users know, we kind of thrive on it and do our best to keep up with the things people are looking for in EstimateRocket. So on to time tracking, just released, as I mentioned earlier. What the time tracking feature allows you to do is track your time by project and work code. Your employees or workers or associates can clock in and out of projects in the field. We record a GPS location during the clock in and clock out procedures. And obviously you can pick projects to assign the hours to, and lots of great functionality. You can add and edit time entries for all employees at the main office, or as if you have the right permissions. And there's in-out status updates, and it automatically, those hours are automatically going to update the profitability, the actual hours by project, and the profitability report for enterprise users. And other bonuses, time tracking. Only employees are only an addition of $10 per month per user. To get rolling on that and explain that, any all full employees entered into the system can enable time tracking at any time, and you can add additional employees, ones that don't necessarily need access to the other features of EstimateRocket, but just need to be able to punch in and punch out to track hours. Those can be added just for $10 a month. And so first, clocking in and clocking out. I'm probably going to jump over to live EstimateRocket just to show you some of these features. You can, depending upon whether you're on a mobile device or a desktop, it's going to look similar. You're going to see a new clock in and clock out button. So right now, anybody who has not turned on the features won't see the new clock in, clock out button. There's a checkbox in the employee record now that will enable that, and once you enable that, you'll start seeing that pop up at the top left corner of the screen. So just a thing to be aware of if you're not seeing that. Once you do turn on that checkbox for the employees that do track their time, then you'll see that. They'll always see that up in the upper left corner, either as an in button or an out button. And that button is really a status button. So I'm just going to jump over to EstimateRocket for a minute, sitting on my dashboard screen. And what you can see up in the upper left corner is that I've been punched in for an hour and 6 minutes on this particular project. And that's handy. If I want to punch out at any time, I can click that button, and it'll show me it's doing my location. And you will find, and from here I can just clock out. It does show me what project I was clocked in on and what work code I had. I can also leave notes as I punch in or punch out. So a great way to track what's going on out in the field as people punch in and punch out. So I'm going to actually leave myself clocked in for the moment and show you a couple of other things. Actually, let me go ahead and clock out. So if I clock out of that project, first of all, it does give me a chance to change the work code if I need to, and add any notes in. always good to leave notes. And I click the clock out button, and it clocks me out. One thing to note is that the location services are much more accurate on a mobile device because mobile devices actually have GPSs built into them. Desktops can be a little bit inaccurate. So if you're logging in from a computer that does not have GPS, your location services may not be as accurate as they are when you do have location services. So you'll note now that I clocked out, I've got the red out status button. So I can just click on that, and it pops back up, and it knows where I am. That's my office, looking out over the river. What a great day here in New England. And first question is, what project am I working on? So because it knows my location, what it's doing is actually showing me my list of projects based on the proximity. So if I've arrived at where I'm supposed to be, that project should be the closest one to the top, and it's showing me how close I am within miles. And we are tracking and recording the location at punch-in time and punch-out time. So what we're doing is currently we've got a 1 mile perimeter. So if the person is within 1 mile of that project, then it's going to show us a green pin, which I'll show you in a moment. And if they're outside of that, it'll show you a red pin. So all that's identifying is, how close were they to the project, and we do actually record the distance. So I'll show you that in a moment. So I can scroll down and pick a project that I'm not right next to. So I'm just going to go grab the Smith Interior project. That's 0.7 miles away, and it actually shows me where the project is relative to where my current location is. Then I can also pick a work code. Now when you first turn on time tracking, if you haven't set up any work codes yet, then you won't even see the work code field. So just be aware that you can build your work codes in to track what type of work people are doing. In many cases, the tracking of interior versus exterior is really important for insurance tracking purposes. So I recommend taking a look at adding those in if they're at all necessary in your particular business. So I'm going to say that is the interior. I'm going to do interior work, and I don't need any notes right now. I can put some notes in when I'm ready to clock out, and I just click the clock in button, and that clocks me in. So that's basically the clocking in and clocking out procedure. Pretty straightforward. Just hit the green button if you're in to clock out. Hit the red button if you want to clock in, and that's about that. And then a couple status screens here. And again, if you're on a mobile device, it's going to look similar to the images over on the right, where you're just going to see, just going to primarily see the clock in and clock out button at the very top. And then let's move on. So the next thing we're going to take a look at is one of the things that you may have noticed at the top of your menu bar is new hour screen. So the new hour screen basically is going to give us a summary at any given time of who's logged in and who's logged out. It's going to show us hours that have been logged so far for the week or for the day, and it shows us all of our employees that have the time tracking flag turned on. So whether they're punched in or punched out, we're going to see them all here. And there's a couple really neat things that we can do from here. First of all, if you want, we can navigate back to previous weeks. So we can just simply scroll back and see what happened a week ago or 2 weeks ago, or go back to our current date. And we can always get back to the current week just by clicking on the hours menu button again, and that'll bring us back to the current week. So if someone is marked as out, and let's say, for example, that Marty here forgot to punch in, and he calls in and says, hey, can you punch me in now? We can click on the out button. We can go ahead and say, hey, Marty, what project are you on? Okay, you're at the Smith Residence 2. And what are you doing? It's exterior work. And what time did you get there, Marty? Well, I got there at about 9 o'clock. Why are you calling me so late then, Marty? All right, well, we're not going to get into that right now. We're just going to go ahead and punch Marty in, and we might even leave a note. Forgot to punch in. And save it. So we've now punched Marty in, and we were able to assign a time based on when Marty actually punched in. So makes it really easy to catch up. If somebody does forget to punch in, you can punch them in later. And you can see a variety of, a lot of information here. If someone is currently punched in, you can go ahead and edit their current punch by clicking on the in or out over on the left-hand side of the screen. So I could either change his start time here, or in fact punch him out if I needed to, or change the work code, or change the project that he's set to be working on. So just nice to know that we can make changes to the time entries as needed. Now, there is a permission in the employee file, which we'll look at in a few minutes, that makes that possible. So not everybody can change time entries. Only people with the permission for manage time or manage punches or clock in, clock out are able to actually change someone else's punches. So just so you know that not everyone can change other people's punches. Other things on the hour screen, if you click on any of the numbers, it's going to bring you to the details that represent that number. So in this case, if I click on the 9 hours that Tom D had on Tuesday, it's going to bring me and show me that that was just one punch. So one in and out punch, and where I worked and what I did. And from here, I can edit that punch if I need to. I could also add another punch, at this point as well. So if you do need another method for adding punches, if you're on the details screen and need to make a change. I can also click on the weekly totals for a person. So if I click on the weekly totals for a person, that's going to give me all the punches that make up that 25.01 hours. So here it represents several days of punches for Tom D, and shows me what different jobs we were working on. There's a couple notes. So if I hover over the notes, we can see what happened in terms of notes for the project. And again, if we need to edit, we can edit any of the punches that might not have been recorded properly. And you can see here, if you look at the little green dots, that it's showing how far or near or far away I was when I punched in. So as I mentioned, we do track the GPS locations on in punch and out punch, and it makes it really easy to see them at that point, so you can identify where they were when the punches happened. And let's go back to the hour screen again. In that case, I clicked on the totals for the week. If I click on the totals for the day, then I'm going to see all the people that worked on that particular day. So it's going to be filtered down to that day. So if I want to know, hey, what were all the projects and such that were worked on the 23rd, I can simply click on the total for the 23rd and see all the details of what happened on the 23rd. So different ways to view things, lots of flexibility there in terms of what you can see and how you can see it. And then, of course, if I want to see the whole enchilada here, I can simply click on the whole week totals to date, and that just shows me all of the workers for all of the days that are in that selected period. Other things, you can also make date selections if you want to. So I could, in fact, go back and expand this and say, hey, I want to look at the first till the end of the month, and that will give me all the details for the whole month. So all my hour in and out hours for the whole month. Now these rows at the top that are green represent employees that are currently punched in. So we don't really have accurate totals on those punches right now. We only have the totals to date, to the moment. So just be aware of that. If they're green, there are still people punched in that probably should be resolved if you're looking for that day. Back to the hour screen. So lots of different ways, very similar to the way the other reports in the system work, where if you click on a total number, it brings you to the details for that particular number. So, and let's say another thing that can typically happen is that you might need to add a punch for someone from a previous day. Let's say they forgot to punch in, they come in the next day, maybe Marty, and so we can click on an individual day for a person and that's going to bring up the whole project list. We can pick our attorney friend, Dewey Cheatham, and also pick a work code for that project, and then assign a time. So in this case, we're going to say that he worked from 8 until 4 p.m. And he completed the work. Save that. So that's another easy way to put in entries. This also makes it easy to do catch-up work if someone forgets their phone, or they're just getting in, learning how to use the application, the time tracking. It makes it easier for you to do the punching in and out for them if necessary. So let's go back one more time to the hour screen. I think we've covered just about all of the current options there. So we saw we can add times for an individual day. We can edit or add time entries for people that are currently punched in, and we can go look at all the details involved on virtually any of the numbers. So that's most of what we can do in the hour screen. And we did look at all the different levels of details that we can look at, see what happened today, see what happened on a previous day, and there we go. So we've already covered a little bit of this. If we edit a current in punch, we get to see the employee, change the project if needed, change the work code. So any changes that need to be made to a currently punched in employee, we can do. We can also add new entries. We saw how we could do that in the middle of the grid. Just gives you the ability to just make a punch when one doesn't exist. We looked at the details. We can select the dates. We can add or clear employee filters, and we can always add new punches or edit existing punches as needed. And then, of course, the full details for the week we saw just by clicking on that total for the week. So all those different details are available to us. So a couple reasons why we're doing this. Obviously, one of the reasons is that people need to get paid, so we need to track the time that they're putting in and have an easy way to access those totals. The other thing that we're doing is trying to be able to track hours by project. So one of the benefits of this, and it does work a little bit differently for professional and enterprise, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the enterprise version. In the enterprise version with the profitability tracking, we're going to see the hours are going to actually automatically accumulate project totals for us, so we can see how the performance was on that particular project. And reports like the work progress and the work scheduled reports are going to show, in addition to what's invoiced and uninvoiced, they're also going to show us hours estimated and hours remaining. So that gives us a really good window into where we are on a project in terms of how many hours we've spent versus where we know we are, status-wise in that project. So that becomes a very powerful tool to easily be able to figure out where we're at, in terms of what we anticipated for the hours for that project versus what we've actually done. Another nice feature, tracking the results. So what's next? Setting up. So in order to use this feature, there are a couple things that you need to do and a couple things that you may want to do. So first of all, any existing employees that you have, you're going to want to go in and check off the time tracking box. So checking off the time tracking box simply means that employee now, in addition to all the other things that they have permission to do, can also clock in and out of projects. The other thing that you might want to do for your supervisors and for the account owner will automatically have this permission, but there may be other people in the company that you want to be able to manage time entries. This manage time entries permission is what gives people the ability to manage and edit time punches or clock in, clock outs, to add them and edit them. So that's a very important permission for anyone that you need to have responsibility for being able to make changes to time entries that have been entered into the system. So those are the two critical pieces to set up in order to start time tracking. You can do time tracking on crew leaders and contractors as well. So that feature will work equally well for those people that have the contractor crew leader access checked off. Then the other thing you can do is, if you've got users that don't need access to anything other than time tracking, when you add those users into the system, you can simply select that you want them to be field users. So once you select them as field users, it limits the number of things that are entered for that employee. So basically name and email address and password, and that's it. And then it shows you, identifies the difference in price between a full user for your account and your particular settings, and what the price of a field user is. And then finally, if you want, you can set up work codes. So under settings, time tracking, we have the ability to add work codes into the system. And again, I highly recommend that, especially if you have situations where you want to track non-project oriented time. So you don't have to assign a project when a person punches in. You can assign them to no project, and then you could assign them to a particular work code like driving or meetings or other things that you might want to track non-direct time with. So the nice thing is you can track both direct and indirect time using EstimateRocket as well. And then, setting up. The other thing that I wanted to talk just briefly about today was implementing time tracking. So, generally speaking, if you're using, there's two different scenarios here. There's a scenario where you're currently doing everything on paper or maybe just a spreadsheet, and that's a fairly easy implementation. And then the other situation is where you're already using an existing time tracking program and want to switch to EstimateRocket's time tracking. So either way, you're going to follow a similar path in order to use this in EstimateRocket. And basically, the first thing is, set the employee time tracking flag on at least one employee, possibly yourself as the account owner or the office manager, and start tracking time for a couple days and just get the feel for it and get a feel for the flow and how it's going to work out for you. And then during that time, you can be thinking about what you want for work codes. So you can basically decide, if you want them, and if so, what the different work codes are you want to use. I do recommend starting out with a relatively small number of work codes if you're going to use them, and add them over time rather than kind of going in and putting in the kitchen sink list. Just think that's a little bit better approach, so you don't end up with too many different categories of work codes. And then the next thing I would do is I would manually enter time for several employees. Maybe they have the office manager or yourself enter the time for several employees, and just verify that against whatever your current system is. Just make sure that the totals are coming out right, and you're comfortable with the results. And then next step after that, if that works out, is pick an employee for a live test, and maybe all your employees at that point, depending upon how many you have. So basically, you just need to go through the process of individually making sure it looks good and works and does what you think it's going to do and gives you the results you need, and then do a pilot with one or two employees, and then when that all looks good, then it's time to roll it out and get all the employees involved in using it, so you can get the full results out of it. And I think that, generally speaking, is going to work, again, no matter what system you're using, as long as you go through a process where you're comparing what you were doing to what you're going to be doing with the new system. I think that's a pretty good plan for success. So that really is pretty much all I wanted to say about time tracking today. Again, I'd like to thank everybody for coming today, and as always, if questions come up after the session is over today, don't hesitate to reach out to us through the in-app chat, or you can always send me an email. We're always happy to answer questions and get your feedback. We really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you all have a great afternoon.